The case of Air India Flight 855 is one of the worst air disasters ever recorded. On the first night of 1978, in the dark night sky, this massive plane photographed here plunged into the Arabian Sea less than 2 minutes after takeoff. This was a devastating case that really was a simple accident, yet it claimed so many lives. The accident involved the largest plane of the day, the Boeing 747. The Boeing 747 today is in its twilight years, yet it is still one of the most iconic planes to ever fly. For the longest time, there was no plane as big as it. No plane commanded such awe as the four-engine Queen of the Sky. We're going to unpack how this very short flight unfolded. Let's travel to India and see if we can gain an understanding as to how these lives were lost. The city of Mumbai, formerly known at that time as Bombay, is the largest city in all of India. This world-famous city is home to over 12 million people today. Mumbai's airport is located within the city just a few kilometers from the coast. The large airport is a hub for Air India, the country's flag carrier. Air India, alongside many international air carriers, started receiving the Boeing 747 in the 1970s. The airline's first 747, which was also the accident aircraft, was a plane that they named Emperor Ashoka. Registration Victor Tango, Echo Bravo Delta. The plane was delivered to Air India in 1971 and was scheduled on January 1, 1978 to fly the evening flight between Mumbai and Dubai. 190 passengers were booked onto the flight. A further 23 members of crew brought the total of occupants to 213. The early 747s required 3 pilots to fly. 51-year-old Captain Mandan Lal Kukar was highly experienced and was a senior pilot at the airline. He was a man well known within the company, described by his work colleagues as cheerful, generous, and helpful. He had accumulated over 18,000 flight hours by the time of the accident. The other 2 men in the cockpit were also experienced in their own right. Sat next to Captain Kukar was another captain, though he was younger, 43-year-old Indu Ramani. With 4,500 hours to his name, he was a commander in the Indian Air Force before he joined Air India. The flight engineer was actually the eldest of the 3, 53-year-old Alfredo Faria. Joining the airline all the way back in 1955 and having trained in the United Kingdom, he was one of the oldest members of crew at Air India. By all accounts, this was a highly experienced flight crew. This is exactly what you'd expect in the cockpit of a 747. At around 8 p.m. that evening, the 747 left the gate, departing as Air India Flight 855 to Dubai. The plane taxied out to runway 27 for a westerly departure over the Arabian Sea. At 8:12, with the plane positioned on the runway, the 4 engines were powered up. The plane's takeoff was completely normal, and the plane began climbing as expected. In communication with departure controllers, Flight 855 was cleared to climb up to 8,000 feet. Very soon, the pilots were to execute a small right turn to align themselves on their course. The airport in Mumbai is in very close proximity to the coast. The western side of India faces out over the Arabian Sea. It took Flight 855 less than 1 minute to go from a well-lit airport environment to facing west over the nighttime ocean. Very quickly, the outside reference to the horizon disappeared from the pilot's view. But that was not something new to pilots who frequent Mumbai. This was completely routine. As the 747 passed overhead of the coastline, Captain Kukar began executing the expected right-hand turn to adjust the heading. And it was at this point that things began to fall apart. There was a key instrument the pilots would have been observing during the turn. Without a clear reference to the horizon outside, they needed to rely on and monitor their instruments. One of the most basic of flight deck instruments is the Attitude Direction Indicator, or sometimes just known as the Attitude Indication, or AI, or even Artificial Horizon. It's got a number of different names. It is such a key instrument that it is duplicated multiple times in the cockpit, even on modern planes today. The co-pilot obviously gets one of their own, Additionally, you'll also find auxiliary or backup indicators. These duplicated displays are all fed their information independently in case of a failure. It's good to have backups for when things go wrong. As it would turn out in the case of Air India Flight 855, the captain's side attitude direction indicator failed at a rather critical point. It stopped working whilst the plane was in that right turn. Once the plane was in the bank, the captain's instrument froze. It stayed there, indicating a right bank, even when the pilots began to bring the plane level. The co-pilot and auxiliary ADIs are believed to have worked correctly, indicating the rollout back to the neutral position. The captain's did not. As the captain was the one handling the flight controls, he obviously was going off what was indicated to him on his attitude display. He would continue to bank the plane to the left, correcting what he would have seen as a right bank. He did, however, notice there was a problem. He would go on record on the cockpit voice recording. "What's happened here? My instrument." The captain was evidently aware of some sort of failure with the attitude indicator. The other captain, Captain Vermani in the right seat, did acknowledge this observation, and for a moment he too may have thought his attitude indicator was malfunctioning. He assessed his own instrument and replied with this rather conflicting line. "Mine has also toppled. Looks fine." It's believed by some that the captain misinterpreted the co-pilot's words here, as in he took this to mean that the co-pilot ADI was also malfunctioning, when it wasn't. It was working fine. Clearly, a confusion of the plane's attitude had arisen. The two pilot attitude indicators were displaying conflicting information. The discrepancy between the two instruments likely became a distraction for the pilot flying. During this, Captain Kukar continued to bank the plane to the left, through 20 and then 30 degrees of bank. The third member of the flight crew, flight engineer Alfredo Faria, had a rear forward-facing view of the cockpit. He could clearly see the two pilots' displays and noticed the discrepancy. He took the opportunity to interject. "Don't go by that one. Don't go by that one," telling the captain that his instrument was faulty, and to use one of the others for reference, drawing attention to the backup ADI. By the time the flight engineer spoke up, the plane had now exceeded 40 degrees of bank and the plane was losing altitude. According to sources, they were actually 5 seconds from disaster at this point. Flight 855 was at an altitude of just 2,000 feet as this unfolded. As the plane continued into the bank, the altitude began to decrease, slow at first, then descending faster and faster. Now, to explain further why a plane may lose altitude in a turn like this, we're going to need to delve a bit further into what we call the principles of flight, specifically about what happens during a turn. The plane had entered a rather steep bank that would only continue to get worse. If you wanted to turn a plane, the way you do that is by banking. One wing goes up, one wing goes down. The forces exerted on an aircraft when this occurs pulls the plane into the turn because the vertical element has shifted. The lift has tilted. Because the plane demands the energy to be pulled this way, plus the increased drag on the aircraft, it requires more energy to maintain its airspeed. This loss of airspeed is noticeable and will be indicated on a pilot's airspeed indicator. It's something that pilots should be aware of. But what about altitude? In a bank, the lift output is reduced. If a pilot wanted to keep their altitude steady, they need to adjust how much lift is generated by the wings, which typically means applying a certain level of back pressure on the control wheel. This can easily be coupled with increased thrust to make up for loss of airspeed. Of course, this can be manipulated to the pilot's benefit, if they were wanting to execute a climbing or descending turn, which is normal. Now that we've laid all of this out, in the case of Air India Flight 855, as the captain continued to bank the plane through 40, 50, and 60 degrees of bank, the loss of lift effect was increased. As the captain didn't have correct attitude information and also no reliable reference to a horizon, he didn't know how steep of a bank he just guided the plane into, so he did not apply any corrective inputs. The investigation would later label the flight control inputs by the captain as irrational. The pilot flying had taken the aircraft into a dangerously steep turn it would not recover from. The other pilot, Captain Vermani, did not intervene in these critical moments. The nose of the plane dropped as the bank exceeded the plane's design limits, One source details how the plane exceeded 100 degrees of bank, suggesting the plane had almost inverted. Airspeed increased, altitude rapidly decreased. The plane had been in the air for less than 2 minutes. In the final moments of the flight, the pilots did begin to recover the aircraft, but it was too late. In a nose-down attitude of 35 degrees, the 747 crashed into the waters around 3 kilometers off the coast of India. Upon impact, the plane was completely destroyed. All 213 passengers and crew were killed. The water the plane crashed into was very shallow, only 10 meters in depth. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, a number of speculative theories arose to explain the sudden disaster. These included mechanical failure, a fire, and even sabotage or terrorist activity. The investigation, though, uncovered that this was a case of loss of situational awareness induced further by pilot error. A lack of flight crew communication played a significant role in this accident. There was a failure to manage the plane. The captain was oblivious to what he was doing. Had there have been better crew management, control of the aircraft should have been handed over to the co-pilot. The pilot monitoring, that would have been in this case Captain Vermani in the right seat, should have been doing just that, monitoring the situation. He could have stepped in, but didn't. This would probably be where I'd normally try to end things, but we're not done here. There are a couple of things that certainly caught my eye when researching this accident. Delving deeper into the pilots of the Air India disaster, you'll inevitably come across other information regarding Captain Mandan Lal Kukar. It's basically the claim that Captain Kukar had underlying medical conditions and had also been consuming alcohol before the flight. I was intrigued as to where this information came from, so I looked into it. Captain Kukar was known to have had diabetes. His medical situation had temporarily relieved him of duty. He took time off the previous year until he was well enough to fly again, which he was. He had been taking a number of drugs and was dieting to deal with this. That is the basic rundown of his medical condition, but the claim that the pilot had been under the influence of alcohol, I believe, came from Boeing themselves. After the accident, a lawsuit was filed against Boeing by the bereaved relatives of the disaster for negligence on Boeing's part regarding the failure of the attitude indicator. And it's here we learn a different side of the story. Boeing insisted there was no failure of the instrument in question, which seems to contradict pretty much every other source related to this accident. But to be charitable towards Boeing for just a moment, during my own research of this video, I was dissatisfied with the lack of information around how this instrument actually failed on the accident plane. It would appear that for one reason or another, the attitude indicator had become stuck. But because Boeing had continued to state that there was no instrument failure at all, they believed that the flight control inputs were somehow influenced by the pilot's medical condition and supposed alcohol intake the night before. Boeing believed this, in addition to spatial disorientation, contributed to poor pilot performance, leading him to make the flight control inputs that downed the aircraft. I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't mention that I have a problem with this side of the story. Not only did Boeing's version of events differ from others, but I am also a bit skeptical about this claim regarding the involvement of alcohol. Firstly, I couldn't find any evidence to back up this claim other than what Boeing and their lawyers had said in this lawsuit. Witnesses in Mumbai at the time did dispute this alcohol theory. Secondly, the Federal Aviation Administration themselves say that a pilot should be prohibited from flying for just 8 hours after consuming alcohol. Assuming he drank the night before the accident, which did happen to be New Year's Eve, and he got on the plane the following night, which was when the accident happened, there was plenty of time there to sober up. Thirdly to mention, a pilot does not need to be intoxicated or have diabetes to feel the effects of spatial disorientation. It can happen to even the best of pilots, and accidents like this have occurred before and since. Now, the failure of the attitude indicator was not the cause of the crash. I am not going to argue that. Instruments fail. It happens from time to time and is to be expected. They're going to wear out eventually, especially these older analog ones. That's why crew communication is so key to airline safety. Pilots today are trained to manage these situations appropriately, something that evidently did not happen here. As already mentioned, this was a case of pilot error induced by loss of situational awareness. And though mistakes were made, I have been left skeptical of Boeing's claim of the pilot's alcohol intake and medical condition being a contributing factor, especially when we've looked at other accidents like this involving younger and/or healthier pilots, for lack of a better word. Furthermore, and the main reason I have a problem with the Boeing story is because something else was brought up regarding the attitude direction indicator. To reiterate, they said there was no failure at all, but the thing is, there were other noted incidents involving the 747 and this instrument. One incident from a Canadian airline and another near accident involving a British Airways aircraft. In both incidents, the attitude indicator became stuck, just like in the Air India case. Enough evidence surfaced for the case to be reopened in the 1980s. These incidents, by the way, Boeing went on record to say they were irrelevant. In the British Airways case, the pilot testified that key alerts to draw pilots' attention to this failure did not activate for considerable time. There was a lag between a problem with the attitude indicator rearing itself and the alert activating. Apparently, the manufacturer of the system made it that way on purpose to prevent nuisance alerts, which, to me, sort of implies that the captain in the Air India case may not have gotten this notification at a critical point during the crisis. Unfortunately, a supposed 139-page court document that goes over all that we have discussed in this section of the video could not be sourced during my research. A search in the United States Public Archives of court documents online did not reveal anything. It's possible that it exists only in paper format. So I will leave this section of the video open-ended, so feel free to interject in the comments below. Regardless though, the judge ruled in Boeing's favor and the case was dismissed in 1986. Boeing was cleared of negligence. The disaster of Flight 855 was the deadliest air accident in India until the mid-air collision outside of Delhi in 1996. This is a type of accident that, unfortunately, may sound familiar to long-time viewers of the channel. Numerous accidents have occurred where pilots don't have a clear reference to the horizon outside, whether it be flying at nighttime or flying through poor weather. Instrument failures happen. It's only a matter of time as to when they do, which is why effective cockpit communication and high standards of training are so key to airline safety. But this has also been known to happen when instruments are not faulty. Incidents in this category have continued to occur to this day. A recent case involving a Qatar Airways Boeing 787 occurred in the very early hours of the morning on January 10, 2023. Leaving Doha in Qatar, the 787 flew out over the Persian Gulf in the dark night sky. The aircraft plunged nearly 1,000 feet just moments after takeoff, reaching a vertical speed in the region of negative 3,000 feet per minute. The pilots recovered the plane at an altitude of just 800 feet above the water. They reportedly continued on with their flight and landed safely hours later. The pilots losing situational awareness was believed to be at play in that incident. It can't really be overstated just how dangerous it is to be flying blind. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to be subscribed as there will be another video coming next weekend. This case, was one that I didn't really know about until people started mentioning it in the comment section of the videos. I kind of didn't really expect it to be this long. I actually thought this was going to be a shorter one, but yeah, I like making bigger videos anyway, and most viewers seem to like them too, so it works out. Anyway, it is that time once again where I must take a moment to thank my amazing patrons over on Patreon for their continued support to the channel. Their names are scrolling on the screen right now, so if you do see your name here, a massive thanks to you. Special shout out this week to Kietil Hellisund, I hope I pronounced that right. They pledged at the highest tier late last week. Thank you so much for the support, much appreciated. If you yourself would like to support the channel further, you can join the Disaster Breakdown Patreon from just £1 per month, and the link to that will be in the pinned comment below, along with a link to my personal Twitter page. All patrons get early access to all new content 2 days before it goes up publicly on YouTube. That is where I'll end things this week. If you want more from Disaster Breakdown, you can check out some of the videos that are on the screen right now, or at least they should be on the screen right now. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you all next weekend. Goodbye.